Good morning, everyone. This is Pastor Jim Davis again, and we've been looking at the what we call the Ten Commandments. And as we looked at them closer in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, it says, "And God spake all these words, saying." So the idea is that God is speaking a word with His people, and the background of it is that He was making a declaration about some things. Now, definitely when God says do this or don't do this, that's a command. There's no doubt about it, and it is to be obeyed. But every time that God asks us to do something or to not do something, it's always for our good. Even when it appears to be for His good or for somebody else's good, it always ends up working to our favor as well. So when God is laying out these 10 words or declarations that He wants to have with His children, He's giving 10 ways to have a better life. Now, we've already gone through 4 of them, and we're now going into the 5th one. And it's found in the book of Exodus chapter 20, just one verse today, verse 12. And here's what it says: "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." Now, as I said last week, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And this week, honor your father and your mother are the only 2 of the 10 commandments that are in a positive form. The other 8 are negative. The other 8 are don't do this, don't do that, and don't do something else. And if you do them, that's a sin. But these 2, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, and honor your father and your mother, are commandments of something that we need to do. The rest are negative, these are positive. But now this one is different from even the other one of remember the Sabbath, because this is the only one that comes with a promise. And the promise is that your days may be long in the land that the Lord gives you. Now, that's not in reference to you living to be an old person if you are one who honors the parents, but it's talking about the culture, it's talking about the civilization, it's talking about the community living in the land that the Lord had given them, which was Canaan. So, with that kind of setup and background, let's move into it a little bit. And we realize that this is one of those go and do declarations and words from the Lord. It's talking about an activity, it's talking about a lifestyle and a way to live. And it must really, really be important, because it's the only time in all of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, whatever you want to call them. This is the only time where God tells the Israelites to honor anybody, or for that matter, to honor anything. So here's 2 declarations of something to do. Do the Sabbath and do the honoring. All others are negative and a sin if you do them. Now, what does it mean to honor your parents? Now, that word honor is an interesting word, and it comes from a Hebrew root word that is kabod. And actually, it means literally something that is heavy and something that is weighty, so it can be either good or bad. And so when it's talking about honor in the sense of being a weight, it's talking about, if it was bad, it would be like putting a burden on someone, a burdensome weight that would be heavy to carry, whether it would be emotionally or physically. But in a good sense, as it is here, it is talking about a weight of value that you place on these people that are your parents. It gives a sense of a value or an importance of who they are in your life. You might say they carry a lot of weight with me. It means that you value who they are and the influence that they have over your life. Now, if you obey the Lord in this word, this declaration. It's good for your parents. I suppose it's good for your parents because, number one, they deserve it. Stop to think about it. We were totally dependent when we came into this world. We couldn't do anything for ourselves. We couldn't even roll over. We couldn't distinguish even what we were looking at. We couldn't feed ourselves. We couldn't really do anything. We arrived here not knowing who we were, where we came from, or where we were going. The only thing we knew was that we were wet, or that we were hungry, or that we were in pain, or that we were cold. And all we knew to do about that was to scream and to cry at the top of our lungs. And we honed that into a formidable art of wit until we were about 20 years old. And finally, we left home. And God is now saying, you really need to give honor to those folks who brought you into the world and who raised you and who gave you so much when you were so needy. If they hadn't fed us, we would have died. If they hadn't picked us up and held us, you may have died. If they hadn't protected you and kept you safe, you would have died. Now, they were doing everything that they knew how to do to get you to adulthood with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and 1 brain. They tried to keep you from making the same mistakes in life that they had made. They tried to keep you from paying the same price that they had paid. That's why they kept saying, don't do that. Don't go there. Don't say that. Don't act that way. And you thought all the time they were being mean. You thought all the time they were trying to take the fun out of your life. But now you realize that they were doing exactly then what God is doing in the Word now. Trying to bring them to a place where they have a safe mind and body. And the place where God has put us is in the care and the keeping of our parents. Now, they are in the place of God. Now, I didn't say that they were God. I said that they were a stand-in for God. They were in the place of God. That means that God comes to us as a father. Now, here's the Old Testament setting. There had been a covenant blessing that was promised to God. It comes from Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and it comes on down through the Jewish heritage. And it would be passed down through their children. That is, if they stayed in the land that the Lord had given them, if they stayed in contact with the land, stayed in contact with their parents, stayed in contact with the promise. They would be heirs of the promise, and the promise and the covenant would pass to them and to their children because it was of such importance. They spent a lot of time making sure that their kids knew everything about it, and they would learn to recite the creedal declaration called the Shema. And we find it in 2 or 3 places in the Pentateuch, but it's especially in Deuteronomy 6:4-7. Let me read it to you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. For thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. It was good for us to give respect to those who spent their life teaching us how to live right before God. That was not only good for your parents, but it was good for you. It produces a humility in your life when you give respect to somebody else and you acknowledge that there are those in authority over you and your life. I will never forget, and there were challenges of youth, I'm sure, and there's many things that I wished had been different. But I struggled until I finally gave my life over and committed it completely to God. And my mother and I had finally come to a showdown one day. It was like we were marching down the street to the shootout in the OK Corral. I was about 17 or 18, I don't know. I had my own car, I had my own job, my own money, and I said, I am going out. My mother said, no, you're not. She said, put those keys on the shelf and you're not leaving the house. Well, this was the showdown. I'm not proud, but I said, well, I am leaving the house. And she looked at me and she said, no, you're not. And I looked at her and I don't know what she was, 5'2" or something or other. And I was taller than my dad and certainly taller than my mother and probably stronger than I've ever been again in my entire life. Nobody could stop me from leaving if I wanted to leave. It was entirely up to me. So I said, well, I'm leaving. And she said, well, you're not. And I said, well, we'll see. And she said, well, we'll see. And it did something amazing. I thought this argument was going to continue. She turned around and walked back in the kitchen out of sight. And there I am, standing in the living room, only a few feet from the front door. And I thought, she can't stop me. There's no way she can physically do it. And I thought, I'll go if I want to. This was going to be my ushering into, I'll do it my way, thank you. And so finally I'm yelling back to the kitchen and she's yelling from the kitchen, I'm leaving. No, you're not. And I thought, how on earth does she think she can stop me? So I walked out the front door and I closed the door behind me. And then I thought, my mother has always been the boss. I have never stood up to my mother face to face or my father and defied them to their face and said, I will not do what you have said. And I thought, if I do this now, the whole dynamic of our relationship will change. And I didn't want that. I wanted her to be in the spot where she should be. And I thought, and it made me so mad because I thought, she has won. There's no way she can stop me. And I stood and leaned against a wall out on the front porch, the back wall of the house. And I turned around, opened the door, walked back in, sat in the chair and pouted. But I was kind of faking it because I knew I'd made the best decision that I was going to make in my life. And that was to leave my mother as the boss. But you know what? She wasn't boss because she was physically able to boss. She was the boss because on a moral basis I chose to honor who she was. Guess what? That's how I think about God. It carried over to God even today. I believe today that it's best if God is my boss. Did you notice the Bible talked about mother here as well as father? It didn't say, and Dennis Prager brought this out, where he said the scripture didn't say, honor your father and mother. It said, honor your father and your mother. So there's a definite teaching in the scripture that both parents are to be ordered. I'd like to share some with you, especially from the book of Proverbs, where it talks about the value of mother in the relationship of parents and how we are to honor them and respect them. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8, it says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. The Proverbs 10:1 says, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. In Proverbs 15:20, it says, a wise son maketh his father glad, but a foolish son despises his mother. In chapter 19, verse 26, it says, he that wasteth his father and chaseth his mother away is a son that causeth shame and bringeth reproach. In chapter 23, verse 22 of Proverbs, it says, Hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. Chapter 28, verse 24 says, Whoso robbeth his father or his mother, and saith, It is no transgression, the same is the companion of a destroyer. In chapter 30, verse 17, it says, The eye that mocketh his father and despises to obey his mother. The ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. Quite a gory scene. And then it ends with the last chapter 31 and verse 1. It says, The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. I found that as I got older and I studied a book or two and I took a class or two and learned a little bit about psychology and some true things in life and how we needed to live by certain things that were good and right, I found out as I looked backwards, I didn't learn one thing as an adult that my mother hadn't already taught me in principle. Honor your father and your mother. You know why? Because they make a unit of one flesh. The Bible says in Genesis 2:24, Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. You know one way to understand how they become one flesh? You came into the world. And those two became one flesh in you. But they are one flesh as God joins them together as one unit. So it is good for them and good for you to honor them and give them praise and respect. It's also good for the kids. Someone is always watching everything you do and listening to everything you say. Living arrangements used to be 3 generations, perhaps sometimes even 4, all under one roof and in one house. And you had a wonderful opportunity for children to see how their parents respected their parents. And what they could learn is from the modeling of their parents, how they should treat you when it comes your turn. So your children watch, and if they see their parents disrespect their parents, then they will disrespect their parents because you've already said by your lifestyle that that's okay. I was taught that you needed to respect not only your parents, but to respect elders. I'm ashamed that I didn't do a better job of it. There's always those times when you look back and you wonder why you did the things you did, and you think, boy, if I could only do things over. But that's the tale of woe for every life. We always wish we could have done better. But I was taught to respect everybody, those in authority, the policemen, those who are older than me. I've told a story before, but one day I walked out in the backyard, saw the man next door. His name was Mr. Seibel. I don't know his first name, but his nickname was Red. He had red hair like me. So I thought, well, I'm getting a little bit bigger, so I saw Mr. Seibel over there walking to his garage, and I said, "Hey, how you doing, Red?" My dad heard me from his living room chair, and he got up and came to the back door and said, "Jimmy, come here." So I went up into the kitchen. He said, I heard you call Mr. Seibel Red. You don't call him Red anymore. He's Mr. Seibel to you, not Red, because he's your elder. So you need to learn to respect your elder. You know, that, I don't know why, but that made sense to me. I understood it, and I never called him by his nickname or first name or anything else from then on the rest of my life except Mr. It's a wonderful thing to learn how to respect. If you want to live in a strong community, you want to live long in that community, and you want to live long in a civilization that's worth being in, you need to honor your father and your mother, and if everybody else does the same, it will be wonderful. But if you want to see a civilization or a country begin to crumble, then don't. And that's what's been happening in America ever since about the late 50s, the early 60s and on. It's good not only for your parents, not good not only for you, it's good not only for the kids, but it's good for God. Respect for parents. Honoring of parents is a trial run for worship, the worship of God. You will not worship what you do not respect and what you do not honor. You just will not give it praise and give it worship. Have you ever asked, why did God choose to relate to mankind as a father figure? Since he's a spirit, he could have related in any way that he wanted, but why did he choose to do it as a father? Think of it. He could have shown himself as a superhero. He could have been Superman. He could have been Ultraman. He could have been a mighty fire. He could have been a glowing force. He could have been a dark physical mystery. He could have been a bright light. And if I were God, I would come with a blasting glow, a blinding light, and a thunderclap that would shake the mountains and cause the oceans to beg for relief. And after the settling blast, there would remain a dancing force of energy that would cause a rumble inside your heart, like the feeling of a bass guitar at a rock concert, until you were frozen in place. And then I would speak with a voice that was louder than the combination of an ocean roar and a thunderclap. And then in some unmistakable experience for you, I would ask, now are you ready to listen to me? But that's me. And I'm not God. I'd take a survey to find out whether you would like me to be God, but I already know the answer to it, and I often thank God that I'm not God. But why do you think that Jesus, when the disciples said, teach us how to pray, he said, okay, pray after this manner. Our Father. Our Father. Now, Jesus had even a more intimate term than Father. And when he went to Gethsemane and was headed to the cross, when he knelt to pray all alone, for the disciples had gone to sleep, and he looked in what was called the figurative cup, I can only think that in that cup that he was going to drink was the sins of Jim Davis. And by the way, yours was in there too. And as he looked into that cup swirling with evil, and thought, I have been perfection personified. I know no sin. But if I drink that cup, I will be guilty of sin. And he cried out to the Father and he said, Abba, Father, let this cup pass from me. But if there's no other way, I'll drink it. He cried from the emotions of his heart and his life. And he said, Abba, which is another term for father. It's an Aramaic word that has not been translated into English. It's just Abba. And it's a warmer word. It's a more intimate term. It's the terminology of the personal heart-felt relationship. It's not just the title of father. It's daddy. It's Abba. Paul brings it over into the church in Romans chapter 8. In verse 14 he says, and as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. And the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we're the children of God. And we can cry, Abba, Father. He mentions it again in Galatians 4:6. And he says that we are the adopted children of God. What does it mean for us to be able to cry out to the Father? Well, that word cry in the Greek is krazo, and it means to croak like a raven. It means to scream and to creech. It means to screech. It means to call out aloud, to shriek, to exclaim, to entreat, to cry out. That's what Jesus was doing in Gethsemane. He was entreating, he was crying out. Oh, Abba, Father. When in trouble, you are allowed to come into the presence of God, and you are allowed to call him Father. And you know how you learn to do that? By honoring your physical mother and father, which is the trial run for worship. I know that there are times when your parents may not have been what they should be, and all I can say is take the example of what they are as what God is not. If your dad was cruel, if he abandoned the family, if your mother left behind all the children, and you were raised in a one-parent home, or maybe they left you off at the adoption center, and maybe you don't even know who they are, you still can hold the value of what they should be, well, the value of what they would be if they were what God wanted them to be, and show honor to that and respect. So God must have had a way that you could understand who he was, and he found it on this earth by saying, you can call me Father. Now you honor your mother and father, and you will learn how to honor me. Let me wrap this up. God is always after what is best for you. God is not some mystical, fleeting, flying fairy that breezes by your life and has no effect upon it. He's just like your physical dad. There to protect, there to love, there to keep. And if you had a physical father, I didn't say a perfect father, but if you had one who was trying, then you have the idea of what God is trying to do here. Respect your parents, honor your parents, put weight to the value of their lives, because if you do, you'll know how to worship God.